Welcome back to The Big Picture. We're talking with my guest, retired Supreme Court Justice or Judge.
Well, I'll be a judge
Wolfgang.
till I die.
Okay.
Like a doctor is a judge. Like a doctor is a doctor till I die.
And we've been talking about the nominee to the Supreme Court, and now we're going to switch gears a little bit, talk about the law in general. We talked beforehand a little bit about the way the law, in my observation anyway, the way the law seems to be evolving a little bit, maybe because legislatures just get bored and they have nothing to do and they want to come up with more and more laws. But
I don't think so.
One example of what I brought up before is laws typically used to be, if you behave in a certain way, if you infringe on someone's rights, or you misbehave in a way that is against the law, you are punished for that behavior, okay? Within the last 10 or 15 years, a change has been instituted a little bit, so that now if you assault someone, or if it's more serious, if it's murder, whatever, you can be charged with that crime based on your behavior. But if there's a component where they think that you did that crime because of a hatred, because of a bias, you can be charged with a separate crime, which is a hate crime. It's basically you assaulted that person and you assaulted that person out of hatred. Okay, so if I'm wrong, correct me, but it's two separate crimes. It's the assault and the hate crime, and the hate crime adds to the punishment. Now, a hate crime, basically what that boils down to is they're punishing you for your behavior, and they're punishing you for your thoughts, what's going on in your mind. And if that is two separate charges, and what's to say in the future that they can't draw a line and say, well, okay, because it's two separate crimes, well, we forget about the behavior part, we're just going to charge you with the thought crime. Isn't it a slippery slope?
It is, but the way you're describing it is not exactly correct in the sense. What we're saying is it's an enhancement to the crime itself. It's something that's being added on as far as hate crime, for example. If there's got to be the action, like you said, there's got to be an assault, or a robbery, or or harassment, or some kind of okay, there's got to be some action, some violation of the law, behavior. And then what the legislature has said, who makes the laws, and this is funny because we talked about this earlier in the segment about the Supreme Court, or about courts making law and not the legislature, but the legislature does. So what they have done in hate crimes, it's every state I think has it, and we definitely have it in New York. If there is that element that can be proven, there's additional elements under the law that have to be proven to enhance the punishment and enhance the level of crime to make it a hate crime. In other words, there's got to be the action, and plus this enhancement.
Isn't it difficult?
And I just want to say it is difficult, and I know what you're going to ask.
Yeah, what's going on in somebody's mind?
It is. Very often you see this, people say, oh, I was assaulted because I'm gay, I'm black, I'm this, I'm that, and the person, it was a hate crime. But there's got to be proof, elements, and they have to look at either statements that were made, very often, lately, things that people write on their Facebook page, or their, what do you call that, instant chat, or whatever the heck they do, So there has to be proof that there is that element of bias or hatred or something to enhance the punishment and make the crime more. And you're right, I mean, it is, you can punish people for what they're thinking, but most of the time, I mean, I can't think of an instance where we could, but if it was a slippery slope where they said, even just because you said or hated somebody or was against some race or religion or something, you have to take some action.
Right.
There has to be action.
Well, you know, that's an expansion of the law that we didn't have
It
a
is
generation ago. Another example that we talked about before, and I'll be a specific example I'll mention, is the SAFE Act, where if you own a certain type of weapon, normally you would be punished if you did something wrong with that weapon. If you menaced somebody by showing them the weapon and threatening them, or if you actually used the weapon in the commission of a crime, that's a behavior. But under the SAFE Act, you are a criminal if you possess that weapon but haven't done anything wrong with it. Now, and you actually bought the weapon legally before, and so, you know, it's kind of a retroactive law, which I think is another area that's illegal. But you know, what isn't that you know, a preemptive law?
No, I know you feel that way, and people who are against the SAFE Act, you know, have said, first of all, it's been upheld, but second of all, that's what we have legislature and laws for. They're going to make certain the legislature, who is in charge of making laws, find certain behavior to be illegal, and will pass the law and say it's illegal. And they're telling you already, it doesn't matter. You're forewarned. You know that is illegal. And when you say just possessing it, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with possessing cocaine? What's wrong with possessing, I can't think of illegal opiates? You're just possessing it, right? And there's a law that says you can't possess it. Well, there's a law that the legislature has passed, and this is reflective of society, because when we talked before about the Supreme Court judges not making law, just interpreting the law, well, the legislature should make the law, and they are responsible to the people who elect them, and they are reflecting, you know, same as we talked about the hate law. They are reflecting what society feels the law should be. And they feel it should be illegal, you know, to possess illegal drugs, to possess a certain kind of weapon, to possess, I can't think of other possessions, but you know.
Well, I guess so. It does come down to what the voter decides, basically, in the end.
It does, because they're electing the people who make the laws to reflect their feelings.
And that's the system.
And you know what else? It's like how society has changed in their outlook towards driving while intoxicated or driving while impaired, right? We have Leander's law now, so passed recently, where if you have a child in the car and you're driving while intoxicated, it's an enhanced, it's a different crime, it's a more serious crime than if you're alone. And that's just, society wanted these laws because it was a feeling a danger to people.
Okay, does that mean that there's no political agenda that gets attached to these things? I mean, and sometimes laws are passed because, you know, a party in charge basically has some kind of an agenda that they want to make a social statement.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think there is an agenda.
And it does come
very
down
often
to the voters, you know, in the
because
end.
you keep hearing people say, oh, they should change the law about sexual abuse, for example. We've had a lot, since the Me Too movement, they want a different law for making the statute of limitations different, for bringing, and these are all reflective of, yes, whether you want to call it politics, whether you want to call it society's attitude, but society is who? The voters. Right?
We have a couple minutes left. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is mandatory sentencing. I'm not sure, from a judge's standpoint, I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad, because it takes away your discretion when you have mandatory sentences.
Totally. I can't believe you're asking all these questions, Phil. You really prepared. We need a couple of programs.
Yeah, I mean, a half hour is really too short.
But I totally, judges, as a rule, and I'll speak for myself, I'm totally against mandatory sentences because I want to have the discretion to, and in federal courts, a lot of judges who, they have much stricter mandatory, you know, guidelines than we do in state court, and all judges feel that we're elected to do our job, to follow the law, to hear the cases, to hear both sides, and when it comes to sentencing particularly. And I would like to have the discretion to say this person deserves a break, this person deserves life in jail.
There are always extenuating circumstances.
Exactly. I want to be able to consider each case as an individual, and each person, and each defendant and victim. And I totally find that mandatory sentences are like tying my hands in many cases, where I've said, I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I didn't, or I wish I could do more, you know, depending on the situation.
Is that, well, okay, we have a minute left. What is the biggest frustration as a judge in your experience in the long time that you spent in the courtroom?
I think the most difficult part, sentencing is the most difficult, but recidivism is the most frustrating part, where there's so little chance of people being rehabilitated in prison and turning their life around in jail or in prison. It's very frustrating to see the same people, you know, people being released from a sentence and not learning their lesson and not changing their behavior and not becoming law-abiding members of society.
That is a whole other show. I mean, because is it the system, is it the prison system? Is it human nature because of something inside them? There's a lot of elements that go into why people just do the same things over and over again.
Probably both.
Okay, well, we're out of time for this. This was an interesting show.
No.
We're out of time. We'll have to have you back and talk about a lot more aspects of the law. There's a lot of, I can think about 20 right now, 20 different subjects. Thanks for watching The Big Picture. Thanks to my guest, Penny Wolfgang. And thank you so much for watching WBBZ-TV. That's all for now. We'll see you next time.